Hello there. It feels so great to welcome you once again to yet another edition of our exciting and impactful program titled Aligning Education Reforms with National Development here on Amagate Radio Communications. Once again today I'll be your host. My name is Daniel Adebi and I'm really so delighted to have you as you join us even as we move further into this important conversation about the future of education and its vital connection to the growth and prosperity of nations. This week we are going to take a deeper dive into the issues of education reforms and national development, but I just want to do a brief recap before I introduce the topic for this week. We'll do a brief recap of what we did last week. Last week we introduced the topic, which was the role of education in driving national development, and we looked at what education is and why it is important for equipping individuals for impact. We also looked at case studies from various countries. We also looked at the impact of education, the impact that education has had on these countries over time. We looked at impacts such as economic growth and innovation. We looked at social development and equity. We looked at human capital development. We looked at political stability and governance. We also looked at technological advancement and digital transformation, amongst others. So moving forward today, we'll be exploring another topic under our main focus, and that is the topic we'll be looking at today is policy reforms reshaping educational frameworks for a competitive economy. I'll take that again. Policy reforms reshaping educational frameworks for a competitive economy. And we'll be looking at what policy reforms really mean and why they are critical to transforming educational systems, and also how they can be strategically aligned with national development goals. So specifically, we'll be exploring today the definition and relevance of policy reforms in today's global context. We'll also be looking at how education policy reform serves as a tool for national and economic growth and also for sustainable development. We'll be looking at the importance of aligning education systems with the demands of a rapidly changing global labor market. We'll also be going further to look at the key components of effective education reforms. We'll be looking at issues such as curriculum modernization, teacher training, equity and access. We're looking at data-driven policy making, and we'll also be looking at public-private partnership and also technology integration. And on this program today, we'll also be looking at global case studies from other countries. We're looking at countries such as Sweden, China, Nigeria, Saudi Arabia, Australia, Brazil, Chile, and other countries. We'll be basically highlighting practical examples of how policy reforms have shaped competitive and inclusive educational systems in those countries. I'll be answering critical questions. This session or this edition will be answering critical questions such as what should national governments prioritize when reforming educational policies? And also, how can policy reforms address challenges like unemployment, skill gaps, and social inequality? And finally, we'll be answering the question, which is what roles should community engagement and global collaboration play in reform efforts? So please come with me as we do justice to the topic of today. So in the 21st century, the nexus between education and national development has become increasingly pronounced. And in fact, as nations grapple with the challenges of globalization, technological advancement, and social economic disparities, we see that the role of education as a catalyst for sustainable development cannot be overstated. Policy reforms in education serves as strategic instrument to align educational systems with national development goals and also ensuring that education contributes effectively to economic growth, social cohesion, and environmental sustainability. Furthermore, policy reforms also refer to deliberate changes, and I will want to emphasize on that word deliberate and intentional changes in educational policies, intentional changes in educational structures, and also relevant practices that are aimed at improving the quality, improving the accessibility, and also the relevance of education. We talked about all this last week. So these reforms are also essential for adopting to changing societal needs, changing labor market, demand, and also global trends. This can be achieved by reshaping educational frameworks, policy reforms, and also other strategic structures within the educational systems. And these, cumulatively can address the systemic issues, that, bedevil our educational systems, issues such as inequality, issues such as outdated curriculum, inadequate infrastructures and gaps, and technological insufficiencies or inadequacies. All this would ensure that there is an enhanced overall effectiveness of our educational system. Finally, even on the note of introduction, aligning education reforms with national development goals ensures that educational initiatives are not implemented in isolations, but are integrated into the broader socio-economic agenda of a country. So this alignment basically facilitates the development of human capital. It also promotes innovation. It fosters inclusive growth. Let's take, for instance, integrating technical and vocational education into national education policies. This can, equip learners with the practical skills that they need to meet, or the practical skills that are required to meet the demands of the labor market, and it thereby reduces the unemployment rate and also stimulates economic development. All right, so moving further, let us quickly, even as we move into the main content of today's edition, we'll be looking at the importance of policy reforms in education. I've been able to talk about what policy reforms are, and the need for policy reforms and the effect that it can have on a country, the national effect it can have on a country's economy. And also, let's look at the importance of policy reforms in education. Policy reforms, I must tell you, has worked over the years in various countries and in various systems. And even as we move further in the course of today's edition, we will look at case studies across the world. So policy reforms in education are pivotal for several reasons. Number one reason is that it helps to align education with national development goals, and this was what we stressed in the first edition: the alignment of education with national development goals. And it appears that policy reforms is that instrument that basically helps to bridge the gap between educational systems and national development goals, brings an alignment between educational systems or educational reforms and educational system basically and national development goals. Education is a cornerstone, like we mentioned during the first edition, is a cornerstone of national development, and without a clear and structured alignment between a country's educational system and its development aspirations, it becomes very difficult to build a competitive, a skilled, and an innovative workforce. Policy reforms helped to bridge the gap by translating national visions such as like I mentioned in the first editions, visions such as poverty alleviation, poverty eradication, industrialization, digital transformation, or sustainable development. In order for all these things to become a reality, there is need for there to be reforms, as per educational changes in educational objective, better curricula, better teacher training, and also better infrastructures to facilitate effective learning. So let's take, for instance, countries like Rwanda. Rwanda has massively, even though they are still in the process and they are still growing, they have massively reformed their educational policies, and one of the things they've been able to focus on was STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. It was in response with the war, the season of war they encountered, and also their response to national building. They are trying to rebuild their country, and in rebuilding their country, they have a vision for a knowledge-based economy, an economy filled with people that are participating, knowledgeable people that are well informed within that economy, and focusing on science, technology, engineering, and mathematics has been able to bring them closer to that vision for a knowledge-based economy. So well informed reforms, well-designed reforms can create synergies between educational institutions and other sectors like the health sector, the agricultural sector, and the engineering sector, the political sector, and every other sector. Basically, well-designed reforms can create synergies. It can even create a good foundation for other sectors to thrive. So by embedding cross-sectoral development policies into education, government can prepare learners not just for the labor market, but to also engage for civic engagement, to also be innovative in the society, and also to for environmental sustainability, and also for them to contribute effectively within their society and within the nation, basically. So this alignment ensures that education does not operate in isolation, but education functions as a strategic driver of national growth and resilience. Another importance of policy reforms in education is that it enhances access, it enhances equity and quality, access to education, equity of education, and also the quality of education. Policy reforms are instrumental in addressing the long-standing disparities in educational access, especially for girls, especially those that are marginalized, or children with disabilities. Yes, children with disabilities, or learners with from various social economic backgrounds, or those in rural areas. So it helps to address these long-standing disparities, and resource reforms can facilitate equitable access by making education free and also making it compulsory. There are some countries, like I mentioned, Finland makes education compulsory, not just compulsory, but makes it accessible, between the age of 0 and 16, and other countries like Germany too, for the educational system, makes infrastructure available, especially for those in rural areas, especially for those that are disabled, provide structure and infrastructure to facilitate their learning. Let's take for another example. For example, Ghana. Ghana provides free senior high school education for their citizens. Senior high school, it's called the Senior High School Policy Reform. It ensures that people have access to senior high school education, especially this would especially favor those that are from low income families. So even though they can't afford to provide free education, but they also provide free education for their senior high school. So when we talk about quality, educational reforms also help to improve the quality of education. It prioritizes teacher training, it prioritizes curriculum modernization, and also it prioritizes learner-centered approach. It also helps to ensure that performance-based evaluations are carried out from time to time, to basically ensure that there is a good standard for education within a nation. So policy reforms also ensure that students are not only in school but are also learning meaningfully. They're having an experience of education. They're getting the best out of education. So I want to basically give a statistics from the World Bank. The World Bank estimates that 53% of students or children in low and middle income countries cannot read or understand a simple story by the age of 10. And this is very, very serious, because the World Bank estimates that 53% of students or children in low and middle income countries cannot read or understand a simple story at the age of 10. And this is basically, there's a term for this, and the term for this is basically called learning poverty. It's a learning poverty crisis, where it's learners or children at the age of 10 can't basically read or write, and they are actually in school. So it is because there are some structures, there are some infrastructure, there are some systems that needs to be in place, and all these things can be facilitated when effective reforms are put in place. So reforms focused on foundational literacy and numeracy are critical to reversing this trend of learning poverty crisis. And also it also helps to unlock lifelong learning opportunities for students and for the citizens of the general populace in general. So another importance of educational reforms, number 3, is strengthens governance and also ensures accountability. Robust governance structures and accountability mechanisms within the educational sectors are very, very necessary and very, very essential for a well-functioning educational system. And this is also where policy reforms come in. Policy reforms helps to define clear roles for ministries, helps to define clear roles for local authorities, for school boards and other critical stakeholders. It helps reduce bureaucratic inefficiencies and also ensures transparency, especially in decision making, and also helps to create a system where performance metrics are adhered to, where performance metrics, and for schools, for teachers, for other stakeholders within the educational system, for even those in the administrative aspect of the educational system, performance metrics are clearly stated and people know what is expected for them. And also policy reforms also helps to ensure that regular audit systems are put in place, regulatory frameworks are put in place to foster responsible management. I want to put that responsible management of educational resources, educational funding, educational infrastructures. Responsible management of these resources and infrastructures are put in place, and also to uphold public trust in the system, to also make people, to also ensure that other partners, or even the general public have a high degree of trust in the educational system. So there is need for there to be a strong governance and also a system of accountability. So additionally, accountability measures allow for effective monitoring and evaluation of outcome. It ensures that there is a provision of feedback for policymakers to identify what is really working and where improvements are needed. So effective monitoring, effective evaluation, and also effective accountability feedback system where there's feedback given back to the policymakers, help them to evaluate where the educational system is right now and what is not working, what is working, where there is need for improvement. The educational system, the educational Ministry of Education basically needs to enforce this accountability, and also needs to put structures and systems in place for effective governance, and also they also need to get feedback from schools, from teachers, from other stakeholders, in order for them to know what is working and for them to know where there is need for improvement. And let's take, for example, India's Right to Education Act. India's Right to Education Act, it includes a strong component of school monitoring and also community involvement in the educational system. So the community is well involved in educational system, and also there's also a system for grievance redressal basically, so people can air their grievance, can send their feedback. There's effective monitoring. Teachers are monitored. Resource allocation is, the resources are not just allocated, but there is accountability in using of these resources and everything. It helps the educational system to improve, and also it also improves service delivery. It improves the quality of education, or the quality, the educational service basically that the students are receiving. So by institutionalizing accountability, policy reforms can help to ensure that education systems are not just ambitious. They are not just they're not just receiving all the resources, and they're not just existing, but they are also functional, and they are fair, and also most importantly they are result driven. Because what is in need of putting in the resources and putting the structures, and results are not gotten. So number 4, importance of education reform. We'll be looking at it. The facilitation of economic growth. Education reforms is a powerful engine for driving economic growth. It's a powerful, and if you can remember when I was introducing our focus during the first edition, I said education is like a heavy duty engine that powers other sectors of the economy. So in other sectors of the economy that are also striving towards economic growth, are also working together with education, or with the educational system and other systems, and other they work together to ensure economic growth. So economic education is actually a main driver that gives life to other systems, or other departments within the economy. So a well-educated population boosts productivity. A well-educated population attracts foreign investment. It supports entrepreneurship, and also it fuels innovation. So policy reforms that align education systems with labor market demands, it ensures that learners are equipped with the requisite skills and requisite competencies that are needed and required by employers across sectors. This includes integrating vocational and technical education, establishing industry academic partnerships, and also updating the curricula to reflect the emerging job roles, and also to affect the labor market needs, the current labor market needs. And also this is particularly seen in various sectors, from healthcare to technology to engineering. There are emerging trends, and the educational system has to prepare and equip students and their learners with requisite skills to thrive in these sectors. So countries like Germany and Singapore has been able to successfully implement the dual educational system. Is a blend of classroom experience, classroom learning, with hands-on, practical and technical experience. So what this does is that it helps to produce graduates who are work ready, and who have hands-on experience, and who can adapt to any working environment, because they've not just been in the classroom, but they've also experienced they also have technical experience and practical experience. So in Africa, countries like a country like Ethiopia has reformed its technical and vocational education training, and this is called TVET. That's their technical and vocational educational training. They've come up with the TVET policy, which helps to address their local economic priorities, and also help to reduce youth unemployment. So they've also been able to integrate technical, vocational education and training within their educational system. So as economies around the world grow, even African economies and other economies across Europe and also Asia, as they begin to grow, there is need. We find out that there is need for these nations to invest more in digital and knowledge-based, and not just knowledge-based, but also intensive knowledge-based and also intensive practical and technical-based education. And also for them to come up with better educational policies that would also provide learners and students with the necessary empowerment in educational and intellectual empowerment for them to thrive, and also for them to build a society or a nation that we envision. All right, so the final importance of education that I'll be talking about is that education reforms basically helps to foster innovation and also foster research. One of the major characteristics of developed countries is that they've been able to invest in research, they've facilitated research, they've encouraged research, and they have a large number of people that are interested in research. And not just that, the government is also funding research efforts. So a strong emphasis on innovation and research is central to national progress, especially in the 21st century. Policy reforms that prioritize higher education, that prioritize research institution, and also prioritize funding for R&D, which is research and development. All these policy reforms that address all these areas, it helps to directly contribute to the country's ability to develop indigenous technologies. I know there was a time in Nigeria when there was a cry for indigenous technology, because we have people that have come up with technological ideas and technological concepts that we believe, if there's adequate funding and also encouragement and support from the government, people can when the government puts in resources for research and innovation, people will take advantage of this, and it would encourage emerging indigenous technologies. And also it helps to solve complex challenges within the economy or within the society or within the nation, and also help the nation to remain competitive in the global arena. So reforms such as provision of grants, research grants, provision of funding, provision of infrastructure, provision of laboratories, all this, or even equipping universities, because universities is actually a good place to start. Equipping universities, with incentives and resources and infrastructures to encourage and facilitate innovation. This is very, very important. It also helps to promote a culture of innovation within the society. Let's take, for example, which is the final example we're looking at. Okay, we will look at two more examples. The first example is South Korea. South Korea's education reform efforts. South Korea education reform efforts have been heavily focused on building world-class research universities, and they also focus on science, technology, engineering, and mathematics excellence. It helps them to transition from an aid-dependent country or an aid-dependent nation to a global technology leader. And in fact, South Korea is one of the top nations in the world when it comes to innovation. And also, similarly, Finland has also invested in teacher-led research and also innovative teaching methods that has positioned it as one of the most effective educational systems in Europe and also globally. Finland and South Korea, these are examples and proofs of the need for there to be policies in place to help to foster innovation and research, and also the positive outcomes of investing in innovation and also research. So in developing countries, educational policies and reforms helps to encourage research and also drive innovation in the healthcare system, in the agricultural system, in the engineering sector, in the educational sector, and other sectors of the economy, and also helps to drive infrastructural development within the nation. So education reforms, helps to support innovation and also puts a foundation. It also helps to build a foundation for building knowledgeable economies, an economy filled with people that are knowledgeable, and also helps to achieve long-term national development goals. All right, so that is that on the importance of educational reforms. So quickly, I want us to look at some global perspectives or some global case studies on educational policy reforms. So number one, we'll look at Europe. We'll look at countries from around Europe. We'll look at countries around Asia and even Africa, and also the Middle East. So the first one we'll be looking at is Sweden's voucher system. We're basically looking at some policies or some reforms that over around the world that just we're basically looking at case studies around the world. So the first case study is Sweden's voucher system. So Sweden introduced the voucher system, in their schools. So it's introduced in the year 1992, and it has helped to massively revolutionize its educational landscape. These voucher systems are allowed for public funding, so people and students can access these vouchers and access funding for their education. It allows students to be able to go to schools of their choice because there's funding available for them. It also helps to improve the quality of education across public and private institutions because the government has also provided funding, and people have also been able to tap into these funding opportunities and help them to enroll in schools of their choice. So, by 2008, it was discovered that over 10% of Swedish students, were enrolled in independent schools, that's in private schools, and which was great, because, them enrolling in private schools was majorly, it was made possible by available funding that was provided by the government. And also we'll look at China's educational investments. China in Asia, China is one of the top players when it comes to effective educational systems. So China's commitment to education is evident in its substantial investment, with annual education spending increasing from less than 550 billion in 2003 to over 817 billion in 2020. So the Chinese government is massively investing in education. Investment has ranged from $550 billion to $817 billion within the space of between 2003 and 2020. That's within the space of 17 years. So the nation also boasts as the world's largest education system, and China, boasts of having more than or approximately 291 million students in school, and 18.92 million full-time teachers. And this statistics that are 2023, they have over 291 million students, and they have about 18.92 million full-time teachers in their country as of 2023. So China also focuses on vocational education, technical education, digital learning, and also higher education expansion. And this has helped them to ascend as per education, and make them one of the top players as per the educational system in Asia. And in Africa, we can also see some efforts made by the Nigerian government. That's the Nigerian education reforms, which was implemented recently, which was the implementation of the Nigerian Education Loan Fund, that is the NEL fund, which provides interest-free loans to students. So students across various tertiary institutions can receive loans, and this measure aims to expand their access to quality education and also align curriculum with labor market needs. So Nigeria has faced significant educational challenges in the past. Over the years, in the past, Nigeria has been one of the countries with the world's highest number of out of school children, and it was estimated that about 10.5 million students or children are out of school. So in response to this, Nigeria came up with the NEL fund, and also Nigerian government has also been able to approve the establishment of new private universities. There are new private universities that have been established, and even currently the government is also looking forward to working on their plans in the pipeline for the construction of new tertiary institution, new federal government universities across the nation. And let's also see the Middle East. In Saudi Arabia, we have the Tatwa program. The Tatwa program is actually a program to encourage the accessibility of Saudi Arabians to education. So the government had to come up with a budget of approximately $52 billion, to modernize the nation's educational system. They shifted from the mechanical or the rote learning system to a system of education that is more analytical, more analytical, and also a system that ensures that people or learners or students can solve problems, a problem-solving approach to education. And this aligns with the nation's broad vision for 2030, and that is their plan to diversify their economy and reduce their dependence on oil reserve. And furthermore, I would also want us to finally look at Australia's educational reform. Australia's education system has undergone significant reforms that are aimed at improving equity and also accessibility to education. Australia came up with an expert panel on educational system. They have a panel that gives reports to the government on educational system, the outcomes of educational effort and everything, thereby ensuring accountability, thereby ensuring that there's a feedback system and the government can know what they need to do and how they need to come in as per education. They've also been able to provide funding for public schools, and they've also been able to raise the system or the standard of their public schools, more infrastructure and the rest. And also they've also been able to improve the literacy, general literacy and numeracy level of their country. So we have more people that are literate and more people that can read and write, basically. They've also been able to expand the roles of schools, not just as educational centers, but as creative hubs, community hubs that fosters creation and innovation. And this has basically helped to address the issue of workforce shortages. It has helped to have there to be people that can also do different things and come in within their economy and provide necessary services, and that has helped. And generally also they've also been able to most importantly achieve a system of transparency and accountability. And finally, in South America, we can see Brazil's educational initiatives. So Brazil has been able to implement various educational reforms to address disparities and also to improve equity. So the country has focused on expanding access to early childhood education, has also been able to implement full day schooling programs and enhance teacher training. All these initiatives in Brazil has also been able to reduce the rate of dropout rates, and which has also reduced the rate of crime drastically. There are more people that are learned, and more people that can make informed decisions, and can also contribute effectively within the nation. And it has led to overall socio-economic development within a country. So it is on this note we bring today's edition to a close. In the next edition, we'll go further to look at the key components of educational policy reforms, which was the last thing we were meant to look at today. The key component of educational reforms, we're looking at curriculum modernization and skill alignment. We'll be looking at teacher training and professional development. We'll be looking at leveraging technology for access and quality, looking at promoting public-private partnerships and stakeholder engagement, and we'll also be looking at advancing equity and inclusive education, institutionalizing data-driven decision-making, and fostering lifelong learning and workforce readiness. So it is on this note we bring today's edition to a close. I believe you have learned. I believe you are more informed. I believe you have better understanding of what education reforms are and how they are very, very critical and instrumental to ensuring better educational system and also overall national development. It is on this note we bring today's edition to a close. My name is Daniel Adebi, and this is Amogate Radio Communications. Please do well to join us same time, same plan for me on YouTube every Thursday by 5 p.m. West African time or 12 noon Eastern time. And can please do well to send your feedbacks to across our various social media platforms on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. You can reach out to us at Amogate. I will be awaiting your feedback and your questions. Thank you so much, and do enjoy the rest of your week. It's bye for now.